In the town of Mariela, mornings were always loud and full of color. Women called out prices, children ran between stalls, and the smell of roasted maize filled the air. Among the noise stood Cato, a young man with a sharp tongue and a proud smile. He sold fruits and vegetables at the market, but he was better known for his quick words than his goods. Cato loved to argue. If someone said the sky was blue, he would say it was gray. If a customer complained about his prices, he would argue until they left in anger. He thought that winning every argument made him smart and strong. The townspeople often laughed, saying, "Don't argue with Cato unless you have all day to lose." One bright morning, the market was busier than ever. Drums sounded in the distance as traders from nearby villages came to sell their goods. Cato stood behind his stall arranging cassava roots when an old woman stopped by. She was small, with kind eyes and silver hair wrapped in a blue scarf. Her name was Mama Zuri. She was known for her wisdom and gentle words. "How much for one cassava, my son?" she asked in a soft voice. 5 coins, Cato said without looking up. Mama Zuri shook her head. "That is too high. I can buy 3 for that price from the next stall." Cato laughed loudly. "Then go and buy from them, old mother. Maybe their cassava grows on gold trees." People nearby turned to listen. Cato loved an audience. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "You think you can bargain with me? I have the best cassava in all of Mariela. You should thank me for selling it so cheap." The old woman smiled, unbothered by his words. "Ah, Cato," she said, "your cassava may be good, but your words are bitter." That only made him laugh harder. "Words? They don't matter, Mama Zuri. Coins matter. If you don't have enough, don't waste my time." The woman looked at him quietly for a moment. Then she said something that made the whole market fall silent. "Words can heal or harm, my son. You must choose what kind you speak." Cato frowned. He wasn't used to being spoken to calmly when he shouted. He expected her to argue back, but instead she spoke softly like a teacher. He wanted to say something clever, something sharp, but for a second her calmness made him pause. The people in the market watched in silence. Then Cato forced a laugh. "Old stories for old people," he said. "I don't live on words, I live on business." He turned his back on her and started arranging his fruits again. The crowd went back to buying and selling, but Mama Zuri's words stayed in the air like the smell of rain. As the day went on, Cato tried to forget the moment. He shouted at another trader about prices, argued with a young woman over change, and even scolded a boy for touching his cassava. But each time he opened his mouth, he heard her voice in his mind: "Words can heal or harm." By evening, the market began to empty. The sun painted the sky orange and the traders packed their goods. Cato sat alone, counting his coins. He had sold much, but he didn't feel happy. He looked across the street and saw Mama Zuri helping another trader close her stall. She laughed softly as she worked. Even though she had argued with no one, everyone around her smiled. Cato frowned again. "What makes her so peaceful?" he muttered. "Maybe she's just pretending." That night, Cato sat outside his small hut eating roasted maize. The stars were bright above Mariela. He thought of all the people he had argued with that day. None of them left smiling. None wished him well. He had coins in his hand but no peace in his heart. In the distance he heard children laughing. They were sitting around an elder listening to a story. The elder's voice carried through the quiet night. "A man's mouth can build a house or burn it down. The wise man knows which one he is doing." Cato looked at his reflection in a bowl of water beside him. For a brief moment he saw his mother's face, kind and patient, the same as Mama Zuri's. He remembered how she used to say, "Cato, pride is like salt. A little can flavor life, but too much spoils it." He smiled sadly. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe words really mattered. The next morning he returned to the market early. Mama Zuri was already there, arranging her spices. He walked up to her stall and placed a fresh cassava on her table. "Take it," he said quietly. "No coins today." Mama Zuri looked up and smiled warmly. "Ah, Cato, it seems you have found better words." He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Maybe I have," he said. "Maybe I just needed to listen." From that day Cato began to change. He still loved to talk, but now his words carried kindness. When people argued, he helped them find peace instead of pride. The market slowly grew calmer, and people started calling him Cato the Wise. He never forgot what Mama Zuri said that day in the market. Whenever someone asked how he became so patient, he would smile and reply, "Once I met a woman who taught me that words can heal or harm. I decided to heal." And though the market of Mariela stayed full of noise, laughter, and life, no one ever heard Cato raise his voice again. That evening when the sun had set behind the hills of Meriola, a cool breeze passed through the dusty streets. The market had grown quiet and traders were returning home. But near the center of town a small crowd began to gather. A traveler had arrived, an old man with a long brown cloak, a walking stick and a bag full of shining objects. He called himself Bwana Sefiu, and his voice carried warmth and mystery. "Come closer, my friends," he said. "I bring you something no one has ever seen. Mirrors, not to show your faces but your hearts." The townspeople whispered among themselves. Some laughed, others stared with curiosity. Cato, who had just finished closing his stall, stopped to listen. He had argued with many people that morning and felt tired, but hearing the crowd's noise brought back his pride. He walked toward the old man with his usual confidence. "What nonsense is this?" Cato asked loudly. "A mirror that shows hearts? Do you take us for fools?" The people laughed. They enjoyed seeing Cato challenge strangers. He crossed his arms, waiting for an answer. Bwana Sefiu only smiled. His eyes were calm and his voice was steady. "Young man," he said, "sometimes people see their faces every day but never their hearts. Would you like to see yours?" Cato raised an eyebrow. "My heart? I already know myself. I don't need your tricks." The old man slowly took a mirror from his bag. It was small, round, and polished like still water. The handle was carved from dark wood, and strange markings ran along the edges. When the moonlight touched it, it shimmered softly. "Here," Bwana Sefiu said, handing it to him. "See yourself as others do." The crowd grew silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Cato took the mirror and held it up. At first he saw only his reflection, his strong jaw, his confident eyes, his proud smile. He smirked. "It's just a normal mirror," he said. "You see, old man? Nothing special." But as he looked closer, something strange began to happen. The reflection rippled like water touched by a finger. His smile faded. He saw himself standing in the market that morning, shouting at Mama Zuri. He saw her face, hurt but calm. Behind her stood people shaking their heads, disappointed. The scene changed again. He saw himself arguing with a boy who had accidentally dropped a mango, calling him careless. The boy's eyes filled with tears. Cato stepped back from the mirror, but it seemed to pull him in. "Stop this," he said, his voice trembling. The crowd watched silently. The mirror now showed dark smoke swirling around his heart, and each cloud carried the echo of his angry words. "You think you win," said a voice from inside the mirror, "but every victory takes a piece of your peace." Cato dropped the mirror with a gasp. It hit the ground but did not break. The sound echoed through the quiet square. Bwana Sefiu bent down and picked it up. "Do not fear what you saw," he said gently. "The mirror only shows what lives inside. A heart filled with anger reflects darkness. But a kind heart shines brighter than gold." Cato stood frozen. The people around him whispered. Some pitied him, others were afraid. For the first time in his life he had no clever words to defend himself. His chest felt heavy. He looked at the old man and said quietly, "So all that I saw, it is real?" The old man nodded. "It is what others see in you even if you do not see it yourself. Every word, every action leaves a mark." Cato looked down at his hands. They trembled slightly. "Can it change?" he asked. Bwana Sefiu smiled kindly. "Of course. The mirror shows what is, not what must be. Clean your heart, and next time it will reflect light instead of smoke." The old man placed the mirror back into his bag and turned to leave. But before he walked away he looked at Cato once more. "Remember, young trader, a mouth can build a bridge or burn it. Choose your words like a mason chooses stones." When Bwana Sefiu disappeared into the night, the crowd slowly scattered. No one spoke to Cato. He stood alone under the stars, his thoughts heavy. The image of the dark smoke would not leave his mind. He walked home quietly through the narrow paths of Meriola. The laughter of children faded behind him, replaced by the chirping of crickets. His hut felt colder than usual. He sat by the fire, staring at his reflection in a bowl of water. For the first time he did not see pride. He saw confusion, and something that looked like shame. He thought about Mama Zuri's words that morning. Words can heal or harm. Choose wisely. At the time he had laughed. Now those words echoed louder than ever. He tried to sleep but his mind kept showing him faces. The boy he shouted at, the customers he embarrassed, the friends who stopped visiting him. He wondered if they had all seen the same darkness the mirror showed. When the rooster crowed at dawn, Cato got up and walked outside. The sky was painted with soft shades of pink and gold. He watched the sun rise slowly, its light touching the rooftops of Merula. Something inside him shifted. He didn't want to be the man with the angry voice anymore. He wanted peace. He wanted people to smile when they saw him, not turn away. He looked toward the market square in the distance. The stalls were still empty, but he could already hear the faint sounds of life beginning again. He remembered the mirror's reflection, his angry face, the smoke around his heart, and felt a deep sense of regret. Maybe it is not too late, he whispered to himself. When he reached the market, Mama Zuri was already setting up her spices. She greeted him with a gentle smile. He hesitated for a moment, then walked up to her stall. "Good morning, Mama Zuri," he said quietly. "I came to say sorry. I spoke without thinking yesterday." Mama Zuri looked surprised, then smiled kindly. "Good morning, Cato. Your apology means more than you think. It is never too late to plant new seeds." Cato smiled shyly. "Maybe one day I will be like you, calm and wise." She laughed softly. "Start with your words, my son. The rest will follow." He nodded and helped her arrange her cassava. As the market filled with people once more, Cato felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Though the mirror and the traveler were gone, the lesson stayed in his heart. Every time he spoke, he remembered the reflection of his dark smoke and the voice that said, "You win arguments but lose peace." And from that day on, Cato began to win something far greater than arguments. He began to win hearts. Cato held the mirror tightly in his hands. The crowd around him waited, whispering softly. The air felt heavy and even the wind had stopped. At first he saw his own reflection, calm and proud as always. But then the mirror began to shimmer, like ripples moving across water. His reflection blinked and slowly began to change. He saw himself standing in the market just as he had that morning. His mouth was open, shouting at someone. It was Mama Zuri, the old woman who had tried to buy cassava from him. Her face looked sad, but she didn't speak. Behind her, people were watching, their eyes full of disappointment. Cato frowned and tried to look away, but the mirror wouldn't let him. His reflection kept moving. Now he saw himself arguing with a young boy who had accidentally dropped a fruit. The boy's eyes were full of tears as Cato pointed at him, his face twisted with anger. He shouted and the boy ran away crying. "No," Cato whispered. "That's not how it was." But the mirror showed more. He saw his friends walking away from him, tired of his harsh words. He saw a customer turning to another stall after being insulted. Then the images changed again. His reflection darkened, his mouth still moving, but now his words turned into smoke, thick, black smoke that spread across the mirror. It filled the space around his image, covering everything until only his angry eyes remained. The crowd grew silent. The laughter that had once followed Cato's arguments was gone. Everyone watched in fear and pity. Cato's hands began to tremble. The smoke inside the mirror moved like something alive. It wrapped around his reflection's heart, squeezing it tighter and tighter. From deep inside the mirror, he heard the echoes of his own voice, every insult, every shout, every cruel word he had ever spoken. They came back like a storm, louder and louder, until he covered his ears. "Stop it," he cried. "Stop showing me this." But the mirror did not stop. Instead, it spoke in a soft, calm voice, the voice of the traveler, Bwana Sefu. "You win arguments but lose peace." The words hit Cato harder than any shout. He felt something inside him break. His knees grew weak and he almost dropped the mirror. The old traveler stepped forward and gently took it from his hands. What is this?" Cato whispered. "Why does it show these things?" "It shows the truth," Bwana Sefu said quietly. "You have fought so hard to be right that you have forgotten to be kind. Each argument left a mark on your heart. The more you argued, the darker your reflection became." Cato could not speak. His mouth opened but no words came out. The crowd stared at him, waiting to see what he would do. For the first time in his life, Cato was completely silent. He looked around at the people he had argued with, the shopkeepers, the mothers, the children. None of them looked angry now. They only looked sad. The old man placed the mirror carefully on a cloth and said, "A mirror cannot lie, young man. What you see is what lives inside you. You can change it if you choose, but only with humility and peace." Cato wanted to run away, but his feet felt too heavy. His chest tightened and he took a deep breath. He thought of Mama Zuri and her words. Words can heal or harm. At the time he had laughed. Now he finally understood what she meant. He bowed his head. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I thought words were just words. I never knew they could hurt so deeply." Bwana Sefu looked at him kindly. "Most people do not know until they see their reflection. Anger blinds us. But when you see with the eyes of the heart, You learn the value of silence. Cato nodded slowly. His pride, which once stood tall like a mountain, now felt like sand washing away in the rain. He turned to the crowd and said, I have been foolish. I thought winning arguments made me strong. But it made me weak inside. No one spoke, but their faces softened. Mama Zuri stepped forward from the crowd. Her eyes were gentle, her voice calm. Strength is not in loud words, Cato. It is in calm hearts. He looked at her with shame and gratitude. I remember what you told me, he said. I should have listened. Mama Zuri smiled faintly. It is not too late to listen now. The traveler placed the mirror back into his bag. Keep this lesson in your heart, he said. The mirror of truth is not something you carry in your hand, it lives in your words and actions. Speak gently and it will shine bright. Speak harshly and it will darken again. As he spoke, the night grew deeper and the first stars appeared in the sky. The crowd slowly began to leave, whispering to one another about what they had seen. Some bowed to the traveler. Others looked at Cato with quiet respect. Cato stood still long after they were gone. The sounds of the market faded away until only the crickets and the rustle of palm leaves could be heard. He felt the cool air touch his face. For the first time in years he did not feel the need to speak or defend himself. He simply stood and listened, to the night, to his heart, and to the silence that brought him peace. When he finally walked home, the streets of Mariela were empty. The moonlight followed him, soft and silver. He thought of all the faces in the mirror, the people he had hurt, and he made a quiet promise to himself. Tomorrow he would speak differently. He would speak with kindness. As he reached his small hut, he looked at the stars one more time and whispered, You win arguments but lose peace, not anymore. And for the first time Cato smiled, a calm, true smile that came not from pride but from understanding. The next morning the market in Mariela came alive with its usual noise and color. Traders shouted prices, children chased each other through the dusty paths, and the smell of roasted groundnuts filled the air. But this morning was different for Cato. He walked quietly to his stall, carrying a basket of fresh fruits. His heart was heavy with thoughts from the night before. The mirror's image of his dark reflection still haunted him, but it had also awakened something new inside him, a wish to change. He began setting up his fruits without saying a word. His neighbor, Amani, who sold yams beside him, greeted him cheerfully. Cato, what happened? You look quiet today. Lost your voice? Cato smiled softly. No, Amani. I'm just tired of shouting. Amani laughed. That's not the Cato I know. You never miss a chance to argue. Cato only shook his head and arranged his oranges neatly. He didn't feel angry or embarrassed. For the first time silence felt good. It felt peaceful. As the morning passed, a customer came to buy cassava. She offered a lower price than usual. Cato almost opened his mouth to argue, but he stopped himself. He remembered the mirror's words, You win arguments but lose peace. He took a deep breath and said gently, You can have it at your price. The woman looked surprised. Are you sure? Last week you nearly shouted at me for saying the same thing. Cato smiled. Maybe I was wrong last week. She laughed in surprise and thanked him. As she walked away he felt something warm in his chest. It wasn't pride, it was peace. Later in the day, two traders nearby began arguing loudly over who had stolen a customer. People gathered to watch. Before, Cato would have joined in, adding his own loud opinions. But now he stayed still, quietly selling his fruits. When someone asked what he thought about the fight, he replied, I think silence will end it faster than shouting. A few people laughed, but they could see his calm face and gentle tone. Slowly they began to notice that Cato was no longer the same man. His voice was softer, his words kinder. Some even began to greet him first instead of avoiding him. Days turned into weeks. Cato's stall became a peaceful spot in the middle of the noisy market. People came to buy not only his fruits but also his calmness. If someone was upset, they would come and talk to him, knowing he would listen without judgment. One afternoon a group of young men got into a fight near his stall. Instead of yelling at them to leave, Cato stood up and said quietly, My brothers, the market is for trade, not trouble. Sit down and I'll give you each a mango. Let's cool our tempers before we say things we'll regret. The men looked at him, surprised by his gentle tone. They sat down, took the mangoes, and the fight ended before it began. An old trader nearby shook her head and smiled. Cato, she said, you are not the man you used to be. That evening, as the sun began to set, Cato saw Mama Zuri walking toward his stall. She moved slowly, her basket filled with herbs. When she reached him, she smiled. You've been quiet these days, she said softly. No arguments, no harsh words. Even the children say you're kinder now. Kato bowed his head respectfully. You were right, Mama Zuri. Words can harm or heal. I think I've harmed enough. Now I want to heal. She nodded, her eyes full of pride. Now you plant good seeds, my son, and you will see good things grow. He smiled gratefully. Thank you for not giving up on me. Mama Zuri chuckled. The soil of the heart is never too dry for change. It just needs the right rain. Then she walked away, leaving Kato thinking deeply about her words. The next morning something beautiful happened. People who had once avoided Kato's stall began to stop by just to greet him. Children came to help him carry baskets. Even those who used to argue with him now sought his advice. One man named Juma, who once quarreled with Kato almost every week, came to his stall with a smile. Kato, he said, I don't know what magic you found, but you've changed. You speak like a wise man now. Kato laughed softly. It's no magic, Juma. Just a mirror that showed me my heart. Juma frowned. A mirror? Kato nodded. Yes, but not one that shows your face. It shows what's inside you. And when I saw myself, I didn't like what I saw. Juma thought for a moment. Then maybe I need that mirror too, he said with a small smile. Kato patted his shoulder. You don't need the mirror. You only need to listen before you speak. The weeks went by and Kato's change spread through the market like sunlight through clouds. The shouting lessened, the fights became rare, and laughter returned. The traders started calling the place the Quiet Corner, where peace was sold along with fruits and spices. One day Bwana Sefiu, the traveler who had given Kato the mirror, returned to Mariela. His cloak was dusty and his eyes were bright. He saw the calm faces in the market and smiled. He walked to Kato's stall and said, You've learned well, my son. The mirror was never truly magic. It only showed you what you refused to see. Kato smiled. I understand now. The real mirror is our conscience. The old man nodded. And you have cleaned yours. Keep it that way. Before Kato could thank him, the traveler was gone again, disappearing into the crowd as quietly as he had come. That evening, Kato sat outside his stall, watching the sunset paint the sky gold and orange. Children ran by laughing, traders packed their goods, and the town of Mariela felt peaceful. He thought about his old self, the loud voice, the harsh words, the pride that blinded him. Then he thought of Mama Zuri's kindness, Bwana Sefiu's wisdom, and the mirror that had changed everything. A small smile touched his lips. He picked up a fruit, polished it gently, and whispered to himself, Peace is worth more than any argument. And as the stars began to shine above the quiet town, Kato knew he would never go back to the man he once was. Years passed and Kato changed into a calm and gentle man. The market that once echoed with his loud voice now felt peaceful when he was around. People often came to him for advice, calling him Elder Kato. He no longer raised his voice or tried to prove others wrong. Instead, he listened carefully, nodded, and spoke only when his words could bring peace. Every morning, Kato opened his small stall at the edge of the market. He sold cassava, fruits, and small mirrors, the same kind that had once changed his life. But there was one mirror he never sold. It was old and cracked around the edges, the same one the stranger, Bwana Sefiu, had given him years ago. Kato kept it close to remind himself of who he had been and who he had become. When young traders argued over prices, Kato would step between them and smile. He never shouted or scolded them. Instead, he would take out his old mirror and say softly, Look at yourself before you speak. The traders would see their faces filled with anger and pride, and many would grow quiet. Some even walked away, ashamed of their behavior. The story of Elder Kato and his mirror spread through Mariela. Children whispered about the man who could stop fights without raising his voice. Mothers told their children to act like Kato when they quarreled. Even travelers who came to Mariela heard about him and visited his stall, just to see the man who taught peace without a sermon. One afternoon, a young boy named Lumo came running to Kato, angry and tearful. He had fought with his friend over a game of stones. Kato listened patiently and then handed the boy the mirror. Tell me, he said gently, what do you see? Lumo looked and frowned. I see myself, but I look angry. My eyes don't look nice. Kato nodded. Anger changes how you look, my son. It changes how people see you too. If you calm your heart, your face will shine again. The boy wiped his tears and smiled shyly. Later that day he found his friend and apologized. From that moment, Kato's lesson lived in the hearts of the young ones. As the years went by, Kato grew old and gray. The mirror became scratched and dull, but he still carried it wherever he went. It reminded him of the day he saw his true self for the first time. Whenever he walked through the market, People greeted him with respect. They no longer saw the man who argued, they saw the man who brought peace. One cool evening, Cato sat by his stall watching the sunset. The sky glowed with orange and gold, and the market slowly quieted down. Mama Zuri, now even older, walked up to him with a smile. "Cato," she said softly, "you have truly planted good seeds. Look how they have grown." Cato chuckled gently. "You were the first to teach me, Mama. I only watered the lesson." She laughed and nodded, and they sat in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the hills. After that day, many people in Mariela kept small mirrors in their homes, not to check their faces but to check their hearts. Whenever anger rose, they remembered Elder Cato's words, "Look at yourself before you speak." And so, peace returned to the hearts of the people. The market that was once filled with shouting became a place of laughter and respect. The people of Mariela learned that no argument was worth losing peace. Cato's story lived on long after he was gone. Children grew up hearing about the young man who changed because of a single mirror. Elders told the tale by the fire, and travelers carried it to faraway lands. Through one man's lesson, the whole town discovered that true strength is not in winning arguments, but in keeping peace within the heart. The people of Mariela would never forget him.